following documentary is intended for mature audiences and some of the subjects contain content of a graphic nature. Times in Focus is not responsible for any insult or hurt that might cause offence. All of the following you're about to see has been extensively researched.
Slow, twist head over, feet stretching out, increasing in speed, mouth open wide but no sound.
If you are not critical of the society, and if you don't play some sort of role in trying to change that society, then you've probably foregone some of your rights as a member of that society. I think it's the duty of all of us at the moment to try and avoid the sort of situation that came about in the 1930s.
Stuck in yesterday's silent sound. Mirrors crack but don't fall down. Memories like shadows in the rain, chasing ghosts in the dark again. Photographs turn to black and white, colors fade under the moon's light. Heartstrings play a lonely chord, finding solace in a fractured word. Times in focus blurry as they seem, dreaming past a broken dream. Fragments scattered, lost in air. Time ticks on, but I'm nowhere. Stars align, then drift apart. Puzzle pieces break my heart. Time a thief in broad daylight, leaves the night an endless fight. Caught in echoes, whispers loud, unspoken thoughts beneath a shroud. Clock hands move but can't erase days spent lost in your embrace. Windows show the life outside, but here I stay where shadows hide, waiting for the morning's grace to bring me back from this place.
You will not agree with us if you are content with things as they are. If you are willing to let this country just drift to disaster. But you will at least hear us with sympathy If you are aware of the gravity of the national situation, if you believe that government by talk must at last give place to government by action, because again and again since the war, the country has voted for great changes and for decisive action, yet again and again their will has been thwarted.
The rise of right-wing media and populist sentiment in the UK over the past decade bears striking parallels to the political currents of the 1930s, though, of course, the context and specific historical circumstances are different. At that time, Europe was reeling from the aftermath of World War I and the Great Depression. The disillusionment with traditional political elites, the economic hardships, and the rapid changes in society set the stage for the rise of populist authoritarian movements. In the UK, while the political scene was different, there was still a significant undercurrent of anxiety, nationalism, and frustration with the establishment. The extreme right saw an opportunity to capitalise on these feelings of discontent, much in the same way that today's right-wing media is tapping into fears and frustrations that many feel have been ignored by the mainstream political class. The economic devastation caused by the Great Depression led to widespread unemployment, social unrest, and a sense of disenfranchisement. This created fertile ground for populist leaders to exploit. The economic despair and lack of faith in traditional politics led people to seek simpler, more direct answers. Figures like Oswald Mosley and the British Union of Fascists capitalised on this economic and social discontent by offering a nationalist, authoritarian solution. The media played a central role in shaping public opinion in the 1930s. Newspapers and radio were used to amplify nationalist and often fascist rhetoric, spreading fear of the other, often Jews, immigrants, or communists. In the UK, newspapers like the Daily Mail gave a platform to far-right voices, while figures like Mosley gained some support through their ability to present themselves as a break from the political establishment.
Radio waves on the air, voices, whispers everywhere. In the night, stories we share.
Adolf Hitler, Benito Mussolini, and Oswald Mosley were able to galvanise mass support through their charismatic leadership. They projected strength, decisiveness, and a vision for the future that promised to restore national pride. While the specifics differ, the context, the issues, and the ideologies, the rise of right-wing media and populism today shares striking similarities with the conditions that led to the rise of fascism and extreme nationalism in the 1930s. The key difference is the context. Today's media is much more fragmented and globalised, but the emotional dynamics, the appeals to nationalism and fear, and the media manipulation strategies are eerily similar. The question then is whether this populist media wave can be steered towards a more constructive future, or whether it will continue to erode the values of democracy and social cohesion. In the 1930s, Mosley capitalised on the economic fallout from the Great Depression, a time of growing inequality, mass unemployment, and disillusionment with the democratic political system. The crisis created a vacuum for extreme ideas. Oswald Mosley was born on November 16, 1896, in London, England. His family was part of the British aristocracy, with strong political connections. He was born into the Mosley family, a wealthy and influential landowning family with connections to the Conservative Party. His father, Sir Oswald Mosley, 2nd Baronet, was a Conservative politician and a hereditary peer in the House of Lords. Mosley attended Eton College, a prestigious private school in England, and then went on to study at Hertford College, Oxford. However, he did not graduate, as his education was cut short by World War I. During the war, Mosley served in the Royal Flying Corps, where he was injured in a flying accident. Despite this, he continued to be active in politics after the war. Mosley's initial political career began in the Conservative Party, and in 1918, at the age of 21, he was elected as the Member of Parliament for Harborough, a constituency in Leicestershire. He was considered an ambitious and talented young politician. He was particularly known for his advocacy of social reform, including measures to address poverty and improve the lives of the working class, which led him briefly to join the Labour Party.
Are you going to talk about unemployment today?
Why, of course. It is the one problem that really matters today.
However, Mosley's views became more radical over time. By the early 1930s, disillusioned with the slow pace of social reform and his failure to bring out significant change within the Labour Party, he was drawn to the ideas of European fascism. Inspired by Mussolini's success in Italy, he founded the British Union of Fascists in 1932, with the goal of establishing a totalitarian nationalist and anti-communist regime in the UK. The BUF was characterised by strong nationalism, anti-Semitism, and admiration for fascist regimes in Italy and Germany. The group's uniformed black shirts became infamous for their street violence and clashes with left-wing groups. Mosley's rhetoric often included calls for British workers to unite under the leadership of a strong dictatorial government that would restore national pride. The BUF was opposed by many, including the political establishment, the Labour Party, and left-wing groups. His political career ultimately faltered after the outbreak of World War II. In 1940, he and many of his supporters were interned by the British government due to their suspected sympathies with fascism and Nazi Germany. Following the war, he was banned from holding political office and continued to attempt to revive fascist politics in Britain, but he was never able to regain significant influence. His legacy is largely defined by his efforts to introduce fascism to Britain and his role in the rise of far-right extremism during the interwar period, making him one of the most controversial figures in British political history. Mosley, whose personal life, and especially his marriage, had a surprising connection to the political world of pre-World War II Europe. The story of his wife, Diana Mitford, and her family links to Germany is one of those tangled, almost cinematic dramas where personal relationships intersect with political currents in a way that feels almost too bizarre to be true. Diana Mitford was born into the British aristocracy, part of the sprawling and influential Mitford family. The Mitfords, for those not familiar, were a group of 6 sisters who gained notoriety in the interwar years for their connections to high society and their often extreme political views. Diana, the second eldest, was no stranger to the world of power and politics. She was an incredibly beautiful, witty, and fiercely intelligent woman, but she also had some rather controversial tendencies, particularly when it came to political affiliations. Diana would marry Oswald Mosley in 1936, a union that would send ripples through both British and European political circles. But this was no simple romance. The Mitford family, particularly Diana's links to Nazi Germany, would prove to be far more significant than anyone might have expected. Diana's connections to Germany weren't just a casual relationship. Her links to the Nazi regime went deep, embedded in both personal ties and ideological sympathies. Her sister, Unity Mitford, was infamously infatuated with Adolf Hitler, having been a fervent admirer of his ideas long before the rise of the Third Reich. Unity and Hitler's relationship was not merely one of admiration. She became a close personal friend of the Führer, attending Nazi rallies and maintaining an almost obsessive correspondence with him. She was known to be in Berlin during the early years of World War II, even attempting suicide when Britain declared war on Germany in 1939. It was this familial bond to Hitler that cast a long shadow over Diana, adding an extra layer of scandal to her own political actions. But it wasn't just her sister's relationship with Hitler that brought her close to the Nazi regime. Diana herself had a much more direct connection to fascism. After her first marriage ended in divorce, Diana married Oswald Mosley, and the pair became entwined with the fascist cause. She became one of the most prominent women in British fascism, and her marriage to Mosley only deepened the connection between the BUF and Nazi ideology. Oswald Mosley's political ambitions were not just driven by a desire to create a fascist Britain, but also by a deep admiration for the way the Nazi regime had shaped Germany. He had visited Germany in the early 1930s and, at one point, had been so enamoured by the Nazis' vision of order and power that he publicly declared admiration for Hitler and his leadership. It was this shared ideological foundation between Mosley and Diana, combined with her familial connections, that led to a deeper, almost informal alliance between the British fascists and the Nazi regime. Diana, with her links to Hitler and her involvement in her husband's political endeavours, was part of a web of personal and ideological connections that linked Britain's far-right politics to the Nazi cause. Mosley and Diana's life together would be marked by years of isolation and scandal, yet the links between the Mitford family, Nazi Germany, and British fascism remained one of the most fascinating and tragic chapters in the interwar period. I'm Sonia Willoughby, and this has been a Times in Focus presentation.
In the 1930s, there were a lot of fascists, but they didn't all get on with each other. Now, unfortunately, they're very good at getting on with each other. Elon Musk can support Tommy Robinson. Trump has good relations with the fascists in Europe as well. You know, but the problem is what gives them fuel is the really feeble approach of the centrist politicians, who don't speak to people's needs, don't help people solve their problems, and when the fascists say stop the boats, a Labour government says stop the boats as well.
And what are the political parallels now then?
The parallel is on that situation of developing crisis. It's only just beginning. So only just beginning to feel the effects of that, it having been masked so long. But in that developing crisis, the government of the day does precisely what it did before. That is, coming in on a socialist or advanced program, it takes over at once the position of its opponents and applies conservative policies, even more conservative than the policies of the Conservative Party.
As the old certainties of the world continue to disintegrate, we are caught in the throes of a new conflict. The far right, whose promise of order through fear, identity, and nationalism has found a new life in the uncertainty of the times. Our world is one of fractured narratives, where truth no longer seems to matter, only the story we choose to tell ourselves. And so we find ourselves in a perilous game, one where misinformation and manipulation churn like a storm, ready to sweep away entire societies in its wake. And yet, beneath this chaos, something crucial remains: the possibility of change. The question isn't just about whether we can avoid catastrophic events, but whether we can change our relationship to power, whether we can once again find a way to trust each other, to dismantle the systems that have held us captive for so long, and to reclaim a sense of shared purpose before it's too late. The forces are already in motion. The far right continues to rise ever more, stronger and with more valid points. The far left, though determined, risks tearing itself apart in its search for purity, but in doing so, it seems to be closing off its own future and not addressing the very issues that the right point to. The path ahead is unclear, the future fragmented, and perhaps, like the world itself, we are too fractured to see a way out. Perhaps the question isn't whether we can steer clear of a global conflict, it's whether we can ever rebuild a world that is capable of peace, or whether we are simply on a collision course with ourselves, locked in a loop of repeating the same mistakes over and over again.